In this LiveWired book, the interesting chapters, I personally found chapter 4, 5, 6, because they're talking about human augmentation, they're talking about sensory substitution, and as you put it into words, connecting brains, creating a new reality, and experimenting with new ways the brain perceives stimuli from the outside world. Do you think that field will really develop so fast that, for example, in the metaverse, in the next level of internet, that the brain will get kind of new ways of integrating information compared to what we know before?
Exactly. That our brains have evolved in very simple environments for a long time, but now we have the capacity to push in new kinds of data. And what we found is that we can feed in any kind of data, and as long as your brain cares about it and there's a correlation to other senses, your brain can figure out what to make of that. So that can be infrared light or stock market data or weather data or whatever, and your brain can understand how to take in new data streams.
I think right now it sounds a bit like science fiction and people don't see the direct use for it. But gradually, with the internet changing and the way we connect is changing rapidly, which means, I prefer the term embodied internet rather than the metaverse.
Nice.
So in the embodied internet, you actually have to use your body, your skin, all these signals to interact with the digital stimuli. And I already see it with my children. They're really digitally native, right? So the way they use digital information is already different from when I think we were young.
Yeah, exactly.
So the earlier you start with these new senses, you will find new ways of using them. Do you think these technologies will ultimately also change the future of education?
Yeah, I'm very interested in the future of education. And so to be able to feel objects and feel data from objects will allow us to learn things in a more physical way. You can't have children doing an open heart surgery in real life, but you can in VR, and they're feeling information. But also, because we can feed in new data streams, children can get data from wherever, some internet thing that's happening across the planet. They can just feel that while they're walking around. When we were kids, we had to go find a book on the bookshelf and try to learn that way. But kids are plugged into the entire knowledge of humankind anytime they want it now. And the other great advantage is individualized education. Because when we were growing up, you sit in a classroom and the teacher is doing their thing and it's too fast for half the kids and too slow for the other half of the kids. And there's nothing individualized there. But now the great advantage is that one can always be right at the point, where something is difficult but achievable, when each student can be kept at his or her own point. And that's really useful because that's when the brain learns.
But one danger I see is actually if people prefer that kind of interaction more and more, will human interaction not become void or people start avoiding live human interaction?
I don't think so, because we're so deeply programmed to want the company of other people. It might change the way that you meet other people or something, but then the first thing you want to do is get to meet them in real life.
I went to a conference, a future tech conference recently, and someone asked, and it was an elementary school child, okay, now we have all these technologies like AI, metaverse, and decentralized identity, and fake identities, avatars, but what's going to come next? And I was a little bit puzzled, and I answered actually the AI and metaverse, this technology is going to meet more and more with the brain. So directly connecting brains with new technological advances will be probably the next level. And in your book, you actually sketch some of these ideas, for example, robotics or social babbling, and the potato head hypothesis. And these technologies are not limited to just one field, but robotics, AI, and different technologies are going to come in. In your mind, how do you think that will realize in the next 5 to 10 years? Which steps do you expect to come sooner?
So we're already doing stuff like, building ways to push information in. So obviously one of the projects that's happening is, people are working on ways to get electrodes and more electrodes into the brain. Now, that might not be useful in the sense that what we have evolved is a very specific way of getting all the thoughts in my brain down to words and then transmitting it that way, and then you understand, at least generally, what I mean in your head, even though it could be different, the way we interpret each other. But anyway, we're very used to that. So it may be that if I had an opportunity to hear your thoughts directly, that I wouldn't really be able to do much with it, because presumably you have dozens of thoughts happening at once, and then you eventually get it down to a single thing that you say. But anyway, as we get more and more into the brain, measuring what's going on the inside, there will be opportunities to have interactions that we can't do right now.
Do you think actually the brain will ever get to the stage not being able to distinguish real from virtual?
You probably know these VR things where you have to walk on a thin plank over a big hole or something. And these things are terrifying to everybody because we're so used to that visual input triggering circuits in our brain that tell us to be careful and so on. Now, that said, we might be able, with some small part of our brain, to hold on to the knowledge that we're still in a simulation, exactly like when you watch the movie and something, somebody is coming at you shooting the guns, and you don't actually feel in fear for your life. But all of this leads to this very deep question about whether we are already in a simulation, which we certainly might be. We don't have any evidence that we're not in a simulation. And all we do know is it's very easy to fool the brain. And in fact, every night when we go to sleep, we have full, rich visual experience with our eyes closed when we have dreams.
That leads to another question. So given that you answer the way we perceive reality, one day it might be indistinguishable from what we generate as a virtual reality. Now, the problem with technology and also AI algorithm is it's so easy to generate fakes and fake information. Don't we have a really big danger there?
So people, when photographs first came out, thought the same issue. Because you can manipulate a photograph, make something look like something happened or whatever. But we're used to looking at photos. We're used to being a little bit skeptical and saying, well, how do I know that's true and not doctored as a photograph? I do think it's possible that people in our generation might get easily fooled by something that is generated by AI, but I suspect our children won't really get so easily fooled by those things.
So what impressed me very much since years with your work is actually that as a scientist, you very actively engage with societal issues. For example, neurolaw, that the law now needs to change based on those neuroscience insights.
Yes.
Could you tell a little bit more about the work you do with neurolaw?
The way the legal system works now, and this is true in most countries, is that everyone gets the same punishment. But as we come to know more and more about the brain, we see there are giant differences between people. This doesn't let anybody off the hook if they have committed a crime, but it says that we might be able to do something slightly better than merely putting everybody in jail and imagining that's the best situation. But in general, communicating neuroscience is so important because as we come to understand what's actually happening in the brain, it changes our view of human behavior.
Knowing more about the brain helps you to accept diversity and become more tolerant, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that should be reflected also in the society system and in the law.
Exactly. How we build our societies.
Very important. Maybe as a last comment, why should people be curious about the brain?
Well, it is fundamentally who you are. When the brain changes, you change. Drink some alcohol or eat some food with drugs in it, or they take medications or whatever. Any of these things change your decision making, change how you act. And of course, when people get brain damage with a stroke or a tumor or a concussion, things like this, that can change who you are, how you make decisions. Fundamentally, the mission of philosophy for thousands of years has been self-understanding. And I think there's no better place to go than the brain nowadays for understanding who you are.
So in a fast-changing world, if you want to change yourself, if you want to embrace change and actively know more about yourself, then you should study the brain. And probably also read your book, Live Wired, right?
I hope people will learn from it, yes.
I hope you continue to write about the brain and keep a happy, healthy brain.
Thank you, you too.